The train whistle screamed through the Montana Territory afternoon as Catherine Hayes pressed her gloved hand against the window, watching the endless prairie roll past with a mixture of terror and hope that made her stomach clench tighter than her corset ever could. It was August of 1882, and she was traveling toward a destiny she had chosen out of desperation rather than desire. The advertisement had been simple enough, placed in the Boston newspaper by a rancher named James Thornton, who needed a wife to help him manage his homestead outside of a town called Silver Creek. Catherine had written back with trembling hands, her heart breaking as she folded away the last remnants of her old life. Her father had died 6 months prior, leaving nothing but debts that swallowed their small apartment whole. Her younger sister Emma had married a shopkeeper and moved to Philadelphia, and Catherine found herself alone at 23 years old with no prospects and no future in a city that had turned cold and gray. James Thornton's letter had been kind, if businesslike. He described himself as a 30-year-old cattle rancher who had built his spread from nothing over the past 8 years. He promised a home, security, and respectful treatment. He did not promise love, and Catherine told herself she did not need it. Love was a luxury for women who had choices. She was simply grateful for a chance to survive. The train lurched over a rough section of track, and Catherine's carpetbag slid from the seat beside her. She caught it quickly, clutching it to her chest like a shield. Inside were all her worldly possessions: 3 dresses, a cameo that had belonged to her mother, a book of poetry that was falling apart from too many readings, and the letters from James Thornton tied with a faded ribbon. Silver Creek. Next stop, Silver Creek. The conductor called, making his way through the car. Catherine's mouth went dry. She smoothed her traveling dress, a sensible gray wool that had seen better days, and tried to calm her racing heart. What if he took one look at her and changed his mind? She was not a great beauty. Her hair was an ordinary brown, her eyes more gray than blue. She was too tall, too thin, with hands that had grown rough from taking in laundry during those final desperate months in Boston. The train began to slow, and Catherine caught her first glimpse of Silver Creek. It was smaller than she had imagined, just a dusty main street lined with wooden buildings that looked like they might blow away in a strong wind. She could see a general store, a saloon, what appeared to be a church with a white steeple, and various other establishments that blurred together as the train pulled into the station. Her legs felt unsteady as she descended the steps to the platform. The Montana sun beat down with an intensity she had never experienced back east, and the air smelled of dust and sagebrush, and something wild she could not name. A few people milled about the platform, but Catherine's eyes were drawn immediately to the man standing apart from the others. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that strained against his work shirt. His face was weathered and tanned from years in the sun, with strong features that might have been carved from the mountains themselves. Dark hair touched his collar beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and his eyes, when they met hers across the platform, were the deep brown of rich earth. James Thornton removed his hat as he approached, revealing hair that was slightly damp with sweat. "Miss Hayes." His voice was deep and careful, and Catherine noticed the way his hands gripped the brim of his hat, as though he too was nervous. The realization steadied her somehow. "Mr. Thornton." She extended her hand, and he took it gently, his palm calloused and warm. "James, please." He released her hand quickly, as though afraid of holding it too long. "Was your journey comfortable?" "Long, but I cannot complain." Catherine managed a small smile. "The country out here is quite different from Boston." "I imagine it is." He glanced around, seeming to search for words. "I have a wagon waiting. I thought we might stop by the church, if you are agreeable." Reverend Matthews agreed to perform the ceremony whenever we arrived. Catherine's heart hammered. Of course. She had known this was the arrangement, but the reality of it struck her like a physical blow. She would be married within the hour to this stranger, bound to him by law and God. Yes, of course. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. James collected her trunk from the freight car, hoisting it easily onto his shoulder before leading her to a wagon hitched to two sturdy horses. He helped her up onto the seat with surprising gentleness for such a large man, then climbed up beside her. The wagon ride to the church took less than 5 minutes. Silver Creek was indeed small, though Catherine noticed several women on the wooden sidewalks who paused to watch their passage with undisguised curiosity. She kept her chin up, her hands folded in her lap, trying to project a confidence she did not feel. The church was simple, whitewashed wood with a cross above the door. Reverend Matthews turned out to be a kindly man in his 50s with wire-rimmed spectacles and a gentle smile that eased some of Catherine's anxiety. "Welcome to Silver Creek, Miss Hayes," he said warmly. "I hope you will be very happy here." "Thank you, Reverend. Shall we proceed?" "I took the liberty of asking Mrs. Patterson and her husband to serve as witnesses. I hope that is acceptable." Catherine nodded mutely. Mrs. Patterson was a plump woman with rosy cheeks who took Catherine's hand and squeezed it encouragingly. Her husband was a quiet man who stood beside James, offering him a supportive nod. The ceremony was brief. Catherine heard herself repeat vows that bound her forever to the man standing rigidly beside her. His voice was steady as he promised to honor and protect her. When it came time for the ring, he produced a simple gold band that slipped onto her finger as though it had been made for her. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Matthews said with a smile. James turned to her, and Catherine saw something flicker in his dark eyes, some emotion she could not name. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and pressed a chaste kiss to her lips. It lasted only a moment, but Catherine felt the warmth of it spread through her chest. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Thornton," Reverend Matthews pronounced. Mrs. Patterson embraced Catherine warmly. "You come see me anytime you need anything, dear. I run the boarding house on Main Street, and I am always happy to help a newcomer settle in." "Thank you." Catherine was surprised by the kindness in her voice. She had expected judgment, or at least skepticism, but Mrs. Patterson's welcome seemed genuine. Back in the wagon, James guided the horses out of town onto a rutted road that led into the open prairie. Catherine watched the buildings of Silver Creek disappear behind them, feeling as though she had passed through some invisible barrier into a new life. "The ranch is about 5 miles out," James said, breaking the silence. "Not too far, but far enough to feel like you have some space. I hope you will not find it too isolated." "I am sure it will be fine." Catherine glanced at him from the corner of her eye. "How long have you had the ranch?" "Built the house 8 years ago when I first claimed the land. Started with 50 head of cattle and worked my way up. I have 200 now, along with some horses. I have a hand named Tom who helps during roundup and branding, but mostly I manage things myself." He paused. "It is a lot of work. I will not lie to you about that, but it is honest work and the land is good." "I am not afraid of hard work, Mr. Thornton, James." He glanced at her, a hint of a smile touching his mouth. "We are married now. Seems like you should use my given name, James." She tested the name, letting it settle on her tongue. "And you should call me Catherine, Catherine." The way he said it, slow and careful, made something flutter in her chest. They rode in silence for a while, and Catherine took in the landscape. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, covered in tall grass that rippled like water in the breeze. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. The sky was impossibly vast, a blue so deep it seemed to pull at something inside her. "It is beautiful," she said softly. James looked at her in surprise. "You think so? Most women from back east find it too empty." "I think I have had enough of crowded streets and tall buildings blocking out the sun." Catherine smiled slightly. "This feels like you can breathe." Something in James's expression softened. "That is exactly how I felt when I first came out here. I grew up in Ohio, working in a factory, saved every penny for 5 years to buy my stake out west, never regretted it for a moment." The ranch house came into view as they crested a small rise. It was a solid structure built of logs, larger than Catherine had expected, with a covered porch across the front. A barn and several outbuildings stood nearby, and she could see cattle grazing in a fenced pasture beyond. James pulled the wagon up in front of the house and jumped down, then came around to help Catherine descend. His hands spanned her waist as he lifted her down, and Catherine felt the strength in them, the casual ease with which he handled her weight. "Welcome home," he said quietly. The word sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with cold. Home. She had not had a real home in so long. The inside of the house was clean but sparse. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. A table with 4 chairs stood near the window, and Catherine noticed wildflowers in a jar at its center, clearly picked recently. The gesture touched her more than she expected. "I have 2 bedrooms," James said, his ears turning slightly red. "The larger one is through that door. I moved my things to the smaller room. I thought you might appreciate some privacy, at least until you get used to things here." Catherine turned to look at him fully. He stood with his hat in his hands again, looking uncomfortable but determined. He was offering her time, space to adjust to this strange new life. It was more than she had hoped for. "That is very considerate," she said softly. "Thank you. I will bring in your trunk." He escaped out the door quickly, as though relieved to have something practical to do. Catherine moved through the house slowly, taking in her new domain. The kitchen area was well equipped with a cast-iron stove, good pots and pans hanging from hooks, and a large sink with a pump. Through the bedroom door, she found a simple iron bedstead covered with a quilt that looked handmade, a dresser with a mirror, and a washstand. The window looked out over the prairie, and Catherine could see for miles. James brought her trunk in and set it at the foot of the bed. "I will let you get settled. I need to check on the cattle before dark, make sure none wandered off. There is food in the pantry if you get hungry. Fresh bread from yesterday, some ham, eggs in the basket by the stove." "All right." Catherine felt suddenly awkward. What did a wife say to her husband at a moment like this? "I suppose I will see you at supper." "Yes," he nodded, backing toward the door. "Catherine, yes, I am glad you came." The words were simple, but the sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten. "So am I," she found herself saying, and meant it. After he left, Catherine sank down onto the bed, her hands shaking slightly. She was married. She was Mrs. James Thornton, wife of a Montana rancher, living in a place so foreign it might as well be another planet. But as she looked around the simple, clean room, at the wildflowers on the table visible through the doorway, at the endless sky beyond her window, she felt something she had not felt in months: hope. She spent the next few hours unpacking her meager belongings and exploring the house more thoroughly. The pantry was surprisingly well stocked, and she found flour, sugar, coffee, beans, and various other staples. She discovered preserves, dried apples, and a crock of fresh butter in the cool cellar beneath the kitchen. It was clear that James had been preparing for her arrival, making sure she would have everything she needed. Catherine decided to make supper. It would give her something useful to do, and besides, she wanted to show him she could hold up her end of this bargain. She found potatoes in the cellar and peeled them, then sliced the ham and set it to fry. She made biscuits from scratch, rolling out the dough on the well-worn wooden table. As the food cooked, the house filled with warm, savory smells that made it feel more like a home. She was just pulling the biscuits from the oven when she heard boots on the porch. James came in, pausing in the doorway when he saw the table set for 2, the food steaming in serving dishes. "You did not have to go to all this trouble," he said, but his eyes lit up in a way that told her he was pleased. "It is no trouble. I wanted to contribute something on my first day." Catherine smoothed her apron nervously. "I hope you are hungry, starving." He removed his hat and hung it on a peg by the door, then went to the washstand to scrub his hands and face. When he returned, his hair was damp and combed back from his forehead. They sat across from each other at the table, and Catherine served the food with hands that trembled only slightly. James took his first bite of the biscuits and closed his eyes briefly. These are delicious. Best biscuits I have had in years. My mother taught me to cook. Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his praise. She said a woman should know how to make a proper meal from whatever ingredients are at hand. She taught you well. James reached for another biscuit. I have been living on my own, cooking for too long. This is a real treat. They ate in companionable silence for a while. Catherine found herself sneaking glances at her new husband, studying his face in the lamplight. He had strong features, a straight nose, a firm jaw shadowed with stubble. His hands were large and capable, scarred from years of hard work. There was a steadiness about him that she found reassuring. "Tell me about the ranch," she said finally. "What will my days be like here?" James set down his fork and considered. "Well, there is always plenty to do. The house and cooking, of course, and I was hoping you might be willing to help with the chickens. I have been neglecting them, I am afraid. We should get more eggs than we do. There is a garden plot that could use tending too if you are interested. The growing season is short out here, but you can still get some good vegetables if you know what you are doing." "I helped my mother with a garden when I was young," Catherine said. "I would be happy to try." "Good." He smiled, and the expression transformed his face, making him look younger and more approachable. "I will not pretend this is an easy life, Catherine. The winters are hard. We can go weeks without seeing another soul when the snow gets bad. The work is constant. But if you are willing to stick it out, I think we can build something good here." "I am willing." Catherine met his eyes steadily. "I did not come out here expecting luxury or ease. I came because I needed a fresh start and you offered me one. I intend to make the best of it." James nodded slowly. "That is all I can ask." After supper, James insisted on helping with the dishes. They worked side by side at the sink, falling into an easy rhythm. Catherine washed while James dried and put things away. She was acutely aware of his presence, the warmth of him standing so close, the occasional brush of his arm against hers. "I usually read for a bit before bed," James said when the last dish was put away. "If you would like to join me, you are welcome. Or if you are tired from traveling, I understand. I would like that." Catherine found she was not ready to retreat to her separate room yet. Despite the strangeness of the day, or perhaps because of it, she craved the normalcy of simple companionship. They settled into chairs near the fireplace, though no fire was needed on this warm August evening. James pulled a worn book from a shelf and opened it carefully. Catherine noticed the way he handled it, as though it were precious. "What are you reading?" she asked. "Washington Irving." "I have read it before, but I enjoy it." He seemed almost embarrassed. "I did not have much schooling, but I try to keep reading. Seems important somehow to keep your mind working." "I agree." Catherine retrieved her own book from the bedroom, the volume of poetry she had carried from Boston. "I brought this. It was my mother's." James looked at the book with interest. "Would you read something aloud? I would like to hear it." So Catherine read, her voice soft in the quiet house, poems about love and loss and hope. James listened with his eyes closed, his face peaceful. When she finished a particularly beautiful piece about the constancy of the stars, he opened his eyes and looked at her. "That was lovely. Thank you." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Catherine could not name. Then James cleared his throat and stood. "I should let you get some rest. Tomorrow I will show you around the ranch properly, introduce you to the animals." He paused at the door to his room. "Good night, Catherine. Good night, James." In her own room, Catherine changed into her nightgown and lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the prairie night. Coyotes called in the distance, and the wind whispered through the grass. She thought about the man sleeping in the next room, her husband in name if not yet in fact, and wondered what the future would hold. The next morning, Catherine woke to the smell of coffee. She dressed quickly and emerged to find James already up, standing at the stove with a pot of coffee brewing. "Good morning," he said, looking pleased to see her. "I hope I did not wake you. Not at all. I am used to rising early." Catherine accepted the cup of coffee he poured for her, wrapping her hands around its warmth. "What time do you usually start your day?" sunup usually. The animals need tending, and there is always something that needs fixing or checking. He gestured out the window where the sun was just cresting the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. But we can ease into things today. Let me show you around. After a quick breakfast of bread and jam, James led Catherine outside. The morning air was crisp and clean, and she breathed it in deeply. He showed her the barn first, where 2 horses nickered at their approach. "This is Thunder and Lightning," James said, stroking the nose of a large gray gelding. "I raised them both from colts. They are good working horses, steady and strong." Catherine tentatively reached out to touch Lightning, a darker horse with intelligent eyes. The animal snuffled at her palm and she smiled. "I have never been close to horses before. They are gentle once they know you." James pulled out a carrot from his pocket and handed it to her. "Here, give him this. He will be your friend for life." Catherine offered the carrot on her flat palm as James instructed, and Lightning took it delicately, his soft lips tickling her hand. She laughed, delighted by the interaction. They moved on to the chicken coop, where a dozen hens scratched and pecked at the ground. James showed her how to collect the eggs, warned her about the rooster who thought he ruled the world, and explained the feeding routine. Then he took her to see the cattle in the far pasture. The animals were magnificent, Catherine thought. Large and powerful, with long horns and coats that shone in the morning sun. James explained his breeding program, his plans for expansion, the challenges of keeping cattle in Montana's harsh climate. His face came alive as he talked, and Catherine realized this ranch was not just his livelihood but his passion. "You really love this life," she said softly. James looked at her, surprised. "I suppose I do. Is that foolish?" "Not at all. I think it is wonderful to love what you do." Catherine gazed out at the prairie. "Most people just survive. You are building something." "We are building something," James corrected gently. "This is your home now too, Catherine, your ranch as much as mine." The words warmed her more than the rising sun. They walked back to the house together, and Catherine found herself relaxing in James's presence. He was patient and kind, explaining things without condescension, listening when she asked questions. She had been so afraid that he might be harsh or indifferent, but instead he treated her as a partner. Over the following weeks, Catherine settled into the rhythms of ranch life. She rose with the sun and went to bed when darkness fell, her days filled with cooking, cleaning, tending the chickens and garden, and learning the 100 small tasks that kept a homestead running. Her hands, already work-roughened from her time in Boston, grew calloused from new kinds of labor. Her skin tanned despite her bonnet, and she found muscles she had not known she possessed. James was a constant, steady presence. He worked from dawn to dusk and beyond, but he always made time to eat meals with her, to sit with her in the evenings, to ask about her day and share details of his own. He was unfailingly courteous, never raising his voice or making demands. He respected the separate bedrooms, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. And yet, Catherine found herself increasingly aware of him. The way his shirt pulled across his shoulders when he worked. The sound of his laugh when she said something that amused him. The warmth in his eyes when he looked at her across the table. Small touches began to linger, his hand on her elbow as he helped her over rough ground, her fingers brushing his as she handed him his coffee, the brief contact of their legs sitting side by side on the porch in the evening. One afternoon in early September, Catherine was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard the thunder of hooves. She turned to see 3 riders approaching at a gallop, and her heart jumped into her throat. James was out checking the fence line in the north pasture. She was alone. The riders pulled up in a cloud of dust, and Catherine saw they were rough-looking men with hard eyes and guns on their hips. The leader, a man with a scarred face and a cruel mouth, looked her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. Well, well, Thornton got himself a pretty little wife. His voice was oily, mocking. "Where is your husband, Mrs. Thornton?" Catherine lifted her chin, refusing to show fear. "He will be back soon. Can I help you with something?" "Maybe you can." The man dismounted and the others followed suit. "We are just traveling through and we could use some water for our horses, and maybe some food if you are feeling hospitable." "I will get water for the horses." Catherine moved toward the pump, but the leader caught her arm. "No hurry, pretty lady." "Why do not we go inside and see what else you might have to offer?" Catherine's heart pounded, but before she could respond, a voice rang out cold and deadly. "Take your hand off my wife." James stood 20 feet away, rifle leveled at the men. Catherine had not heard him approach, but she had never been so grateful to see anyone in her life. The leader released her arm but did not look particularly concerned. "Easy there, Thornton. We just stopped for some water." "The water is outside. Catherine, come here." Catherine hurried to James's side, and he shifted slightly to place himself between her and the men, never lowering the rifle. "Water your horses and move on," James said flatly. "You are not welcome here." Now that is not very neighborly. But the man was already backing toward his horse. Something in James's eyes must have convinced him not to push further. "We will be going. But you might want to keep a closer eye on that pretty wife of yours. Never know who might come calling when you are out with your cattle." The threat hung in the air as the men mounted and rode off. James did not lower the rifle until they were specks in the distance. Then he turned to Catherine, his face pale beneath his tan. "Did they hurt you?" "No, you arrived in time." Catherine found she was shaking now that the danger had passed. "Who were they? Drifters, probably, or worse." James set the rifle aside and took her gently by the shoulders. "Are you sure you are all right?" "I am fine." But her voice wobbled on the words. James pulled her into his arms and Catherine went willingly, pressing her face against his chest. She could hear his heart hammering as fast as her own. His arms came around her, strong and protective, and she felt safe for the first time since the men had ridden up. "I am sorry," James said into her hair. "I should not have left you alone. I did not think this is usually such quiet country." "You could not have known they would come." Catherine pulled back enough to look up at him. "Thank you for coming when you did." They stood there for a long moment, James's arms still around her, Catherine's hands resting on his chest. Something shifted between them, an awareness that had been building for weeks suddenly crystallizing into certainty. James raised one hand to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing gently across her skin. "Catherine," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." "Yes." "I know this marriage was supposed to be practical, an arrangement, but somewhere along the way it became more than that for me." His eyes searched hers. "You have become more than that." "I find myself watching for you in the morning, looking forward to our meals together, treasuring the sound of your voice reading poetry in the evenings. I care for you, more than I probably should." Catherine's breath caught. "James, you do not have to say anything. I do not want to pressure you. I just needed you to know." He started to pull away, but Catherine held tight to his shirt. "Wait, you are not the only one whose feelings have changed." The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. "I came here expecting nothing more than security and a roof over my head. But you have given me so much more than that. You have been kind and patient and good, and I find myself caring for you too." James's eyes lit up with something fierce and tender. "Truly, truly." He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away, and pressed his lips to hers. This kiss was nothing like the brief peck they had shared at their wedding. This was deep and sweet and full of longing. Catherine rose on her toes, her arms sliding around his neck, kissing him back with all the feeling that had been building inside her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. James rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks. So have I," Catherine smiled. "Though I was afraid to admit it, even to myself." "No more separate bedrooms?" James asked hopefully. Catherine felt her cheeks heat, but she met his eyes steadily. "No more separate bedrooms." That night, Catherine moved her belongings into the larger bedroom, and when James came to bed, she was waiting for him. He loved her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished. Afterwards, she lay in his arms, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I was so afraid when I came here," she whispered into the darkness. Afraid you would be cruel or cold, or that I would fail at being the wife you needed. James tightened his arms around her. You could never fail at that. You are more than I ever hoped for. What if you grow tired of me? The fear came from somewhere deep inside, a place she had not known existed. What if this is just new and exciting now, but in a few months or years, you realize you made a mistake? James shifted to prop himself up on one elbow, looking down at her seriously. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated his face, and she could see the intensity in his eyes. Not in 100 lifetimes, he said firmly. Catherine, I spent 8 years building this ranch alone, telling myself I did not need anyone, that being self-sufficient was enough. But it was not. This house was just a building until you walked into it. Now it is a home. You have brought light and laughter and warmth to every corner of my life. You could never bore me or disappoint me because you are exactly what I have been missing without even knowing it. Tears spilled down Catherine's cheeks. How can you be so certain? Because every day I discover something new to love about you, the way you sing when you are making bread, the way you talk to the chickens like they are your friends, the way you read poetry with such passion. The way you were brave enough to leave everything you knew and start over in a place you had never been. That takes courage, and I admire you for it more than I can say. He brushed the tears from her cheeks with gentle fingers. I promise you, Catherine. Not in 100 lifetimes would I grow tired of you. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. Catherine pulled him down for another kiss, pouring all her gratitude and growing love into it. I was so foolish to doubt it, to doubt you. No, you were being human. You have been hurt and disappointed before. It makes sense that you would be cautious. James settled back down beside her, pulling her close. I will just have to spend every day for the rest of our lives proving to you that I mean what I say. That sounds perfect. They fell asleep tangled together, and when Catherine woke in the morning with James's arm heavy across her waist, his breath warm against her neck, she felt truly happy for the first time in years. The seasons turned, and Catherine's first Montana winter proved as harsh as James had warned. Snow piled higher than she had ever imagined possible, and the temperature dropped so low that water froze in the basin overnight. For weeks, they were confined to the house and barn, only venturing out to care for the animals. But Catherine found she did not mind the isolation. The long evenings by the fire with James more than compensated for the cold and snow. They talked for hours, sharing stories from their pasts, dreams for the future. James taught her to play chess with a set carved from wood, and Catherine taught him card games her father had shown her. They read to each other, their book collection growing as James ordered new volumes from catalogs. They made love in the warm cocoon of their bed while wind howled outside, finding comfort and pleasure in each other's bodies. When spring finally arrived, Catherine felt like a bear emerging from hibernation. The world burst into life around them. The prairie turned green, wildflowers bloomed in impossible profusion, and the cattle that had survived the winter grew sleek and healthy on the new grass. In April, Catherine realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another month to be certain before telling James, wanting to be absolutely sure. When she finally shared the news, he picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy. We are going to have a baby. Catherine, that is wonderful. You are happy. She had been nervous about his reaction, afraid the responsibility might seem like a burden. Happy, I am overjoyed. He set her down carefully as though she had suddenly become fragile. Are you all right? Should you be resting? Do you need anything? Catherine laughed at his anxious expression. I am perfectly fine. Women have been having babies forever. I am strong and healthy. Everything will be all right. But as her belly grew through the summer months, she saw James's protectiveness increase. He insisted she stop lifting heavy things, tried to take over her chores, hovered until Catherine finally had to shoo him away. It was sweet, even when it was exasperating. I am pregnant, not made of glass, she told him one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from hanging laundry. I know. I just worry. James ran a hand through his hair. What if something goes wrong? The nearest doctor is 20 miles away in Virginia City. If there were a problem, Catherine took his face between her hands. Nothing is going to go wrong, and Mrs. Patterson has delivered dozens of babies. She has already agreed to come stay with us when my time comes. We are prepared. I just cannot lose you. The naked fear in James's voice made her heart clench. You and this baby are everything to me. You are not going to lose me, I promise. She kissed him gently. I am tougher than I look. In late November, Catherine went into labor 2 weeks earlier than expected. James rode through a snowstorm to fetch Mrs. Patterson, his face white with terror when he returned with her. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. James paced in the main room like a caged animal, flinching at every cry that escaped Catherine's lips. Finally, as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, a baby's wail rang through the house. James burst into the bedroom to find Catherine propped up on pillows, exhausted but smiling, holding a red-faced infant wrapped in blankets. A son, Mrs. Patterson announced proudly. A fine, healthy boy. A son. James approached the bed as though in a dream. He looked down at the baby, then at Catherine. You did it. We did it. Catherine held out the baby. Do you want to hold your son? James took the infant with shaking hands, cradling him carefully against his chest. The baby had stopped crying and was looking up at his father with unfocused eyes. Catherine watched James's face transform as he looked down at his child, saw the fierce love and protective instinct that flooded his features. He is perfect, James whispered. Absolutely perfect. What should we name him? Catherine asked. They had discussed names during the pregnancy but never settled on anything definite. Now James looked up from the baby, his eyes suspiciously bright. What about Thomas? It was my father's name. He died when I was young, but I remember him as a good man. Thomas Thornton. Catherine tried it out. I like it. Tommy when he is small. Welcome to the world, Thomas Thornton. James bent to kiss Catherine's forehead. Thank you for him for everything. I love you so much. I love you too. And Catherine meant it with her whole heart. What had started as a practical arrangement had become the greatest love story of her life. Mrs. Patterson stayed for a week to help Catherine recover and learn how to care for the baby. Tommy was a good-natured infant, eating well and sleeping in stretches that allowed Catherine to rest. James was a surprisingly devoted father, taking over nighttime diaper changes so Catherine could sleep, walking the floor with Tommy when he was fussy, staring at him for hours with an expression of wonder. The winter passed in a blur of feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights. But Catherine found joy in every moment. Watching James teach Tommy to grab his finger, seeing her son smile for the first time, listening to James sing lullabies in his deep, slightly off-key voice. When spring arrived again, Tommy was 5 months old and growing like a weed. Catherine took him outside to see the ranch, showing him the horses and chickens, letting him feel the prairie grass between his fingers. James built a cradle that rocked gently, and they took turns pushing it with their feet while they ate meals or read in the evenings. Life settled into a new rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper, and James hired 2 permanent hands to help with the increased herd. Catherine found herself becoming friends with some of the other ranch wives when they made trips to Silver Creek. The isolation that might have driven some women mad felt like paradise to Catherine. She had everything she needed right here. In the summer of 1884, when Tommy was almost 2 years old, Catherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time James's reaction was pure delight without the underlying fear. Tommy needs a brother or sister to play with, he declared. I was hoping you would be happy. Happy does not begin to cover it. James pulled her into his arms. Every day with you gets better. I did not think that was possible, but it keeps happening. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in February of 1885, Catherine delivered a healthy daughter they named Rose. She had her father's dark hair and her mother's gray eyes, and she was loud and demanding from her first breath. She knows what she wants, Catherine said, amused as Rose screamed for her feeding. She gets that from you, James teased. Stubborn and determined. I prefer to think of it as strong-willed. Catherine settled Rose at her breast, and the baby latched on greedily. Tommy toddled over to peer at his sister with curious eyes. Baby, he declared, patting Rose's head gently as Catherine had taught him. Yes, that is your sister Rose. You are going to help take care of her. Watching her husband and 2 children, Catherine felt her heart swell with contentment. This was not the life she had imagined back in Boston when she answered James's advertisement. It was so much better. The years flowed by like water. Tommy grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the ranch from the ground up. Rose was a whirlwind of energy, fearless and bright, climbing everything in sight and giving Catherine dozens of small heart attacks. In 1887, Catherine gave birth to another son, Daniel, who was sweet-tempered and easygoing from the start. The ranch continued to expand. James proved to be an excellent businessman, selling his cattle at good prices and investing wisely. They built an addition onto the house to accommodate their growing family. They bought more land and increased their herd to 500 head. James hired more hands, and Catherine found herself cooking for a small army during roundup and branding seasons. But despite the hard work and the chaos of raising 3 children, Catherine and James's love only deepened. They still made time for each other, stealing moments alone whenever they could. Long conversations on the porch after the children were asleep. Rides across the prairie on Sunday afternoons. Quiet intimacy in the dark of night. One evening in the fall of 1889, after putting the children to bed, Catherine and James sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Catherine was 30 years old now, James 37. 7 years had passed since that day she stepped off the train in Silver Creek, terrified and uncertain. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. Sending for a mail-order bride instead of finding someone the traditional way, James looked at her in surprise. "Regret it?" "Catherine, answering your letter was the smartest thing I ever did." "Why would you ask that?" "I do not know. Sometimes I just wonder if you ever wish things had been different, more normal." James reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "You asked me once if I would grow tired of you. I told you not in 100 lifetimes. Do you remember?" "Of course I remember." "I meant every word of it, and 7 years later I mean it even more." He turned to face her fully. "Catherine, you are my best friend, my partner, the love of my life, and the mother of my children. You make me laugh every day. You challenge me to be better. You have turned this ranch into a home filled with love and laughter. How could I possibly regret any part of what brought us together? Even though we started as strangers, especially because we started as strangers, we built this love from nothing. We chose each other over and over again every single day. That makes it stronger, not weaker." James pulled her close. "I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you even more tomorrow. That is a promise." Catherine rested her head on his shoulder, watching their children's shadows move behind the curtained windows. "I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." "Do you remember how terrified you were that first day? You looked ready to bolt when I met you at the train station." Catherine laughed. "I was terrified. I thought you might be some grizzled old man with no teeth who would work me to death. And instead you got me." "I hope that was not too disappointing." She poked him in the ribs. "You know very well it was not, though I do wish you had warned me about Montana winters. That first one nearly did me in. But you survived. You are tougher than you think. I had to be married to you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the prairie settling in for the night. Inside, they heard Rose's voice raised in protest about something, followed by Tommy's patient explanation. Daniel's giggle floated out through the window. "They are good children," Catherine said softly. "They are, because they have an excellent mother. And a wonderful father." James squeezed her hand. "We make a good team, Mrs. Thornton." "Yes, we do, Mr. Thornton." The following year brought both joy and challenge. A drought hit Montana in the summer, and James worried constantly about the cattle and the grass. Water became precious, and every day without rain increased the tension. Catherine did what she could to economize, to stretch resources, to keep the household running smoothly despite the stress. Then in August, Tommy fell from a horse and broke his arm. The break was bad enough that they had to take him all the way to Virginia City to see the doctor. Catherine rode in the back of the wagon with her son's head in her lap, trying to soothe him while James drove the horses as fast as he dared. The doctor set the bone and put Tommy's arm in a cast, assuring them he would heal completely. But the incident shook both Catherine and James. That night in their hotel room, while Tommy slept soundly thanks to the laudanum the doctor had given him, Catherine broke down. "He could have been killed," she sobbed against James's chest, "if he had fallen differently, if he had hit his head, but he did not. He is going to be fine." James held her tight, though she could feel the tremor in his hands that betrayed his own fear. "I cannot lose him. I cannot lose any of them, or you. You are not going to lose any of us." James tilted her face up to his. "We are survivors, Catherine, all of us. We have weathered every storm so far, and we will weather whatever comes next, together. Promise me we will always be together." "I promise." "Nothing is going to separate us. Not now, not ever." The drought finally broke in September, and the rain that came was sweet and plentiful. The grass greened up, the cattle drank their fill, and the crisis passed. Tommy's arm healed straight and strong, and he was back in the saddle by October, though Catherine's heart was in her throat every time she watched him ride. Life continued its steady march forward. In 1891, Catherine gave birth to her fourth child, a daughter they named Ellen after James's mother. With 4 children, the house was constantly full of noise and activity. Catherine often fell into bed exhausted, but it was a good exhaustion, born of a full and meaningful life. The town of Silver Creek grew around them. More families moved in, more businesses opened. The railroad extended its line, making it easier to ship cattle to market. James became a respected member of the community, serving on the town council and helping to establish a proper school. Catherine joined the Ladies' Aid Society and helped organize church socials. They were no longer isolated homesteaders, but part of a thriving community. But Catherine's favorite times remained the quiet moments alone with James. After 14 years of marriage, they still sought each other out, still found excuses to touch, still looked at each other with love and desire. They had built something rare and precious, and they both knew it. One evening in the spring of 1895, Catherine was doing the supper dishes when James came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. She leaned back against him with a contented sigh. "The children are playing outside," he murmured against her ear. "We have a few minutes alone." Catherine turned in his arms, drying her hands on her apron. "What did you have in mind?" "Just this." He kissed her slowly, deeply, in the way that still made her knees weak after all these years. "I love you, Catherine Thornton. I love you too, always. Do you remember what I told you, about not growing tired of you in 100 lifetimes? Yes. I want you to know that was not just something I said in the moment. It is the truest thing I have ever spoken." James cupped her face in his hands. "You are the best thing in my life, you and the children. I thank God every day that you answered my advertisement." "I thank God that you placed it." Catherine smiled up at him. "You saved my life, James, not just by offering me security, but by loving me. By showing me what a true partnership looks like, by giving me a home and a family and a purpose. We saved each other." He kissed her forehead gently. "And we will keep saving each other every single day for as long as we both shall live." Through the window, they could hear their children laughing. Tommy, now 12 years old and teaching Rose to throw a lasso. Daniel at 7 trying to copy his older brother, and little Ellen toddling after them all. The ranch spread out beyond, prosperous and peaceful, a testament to years of hard work and love. Catherine thought back to that frightened girl who had stepped off the train 13 years ago, convinced she was settling for survival rather than choosing a life. How wrong she had been. How gloriously, wonderfully wrong. This was not just survival. This was abundance. This was joy. This was love in its purest form, built day by day, choice by choice, until it became something unbreakable. The years continued to unfold with a steady rhythm that Catherine had come to treasure. By 1897, the ranch had grown into one of the largest operations in the territory. James had taken on a partner to help manage the expanding herd, a young man named William Foster who was eager and hardworking. With more help, James found himself with more time to spend with his family, a luxury he had not anticipated when he first started ranching. Tommy was 14 now, already as tall as his father and determined to prove himself as a capable ranch hand. He spent his days riding fence lines, helping with the cattle, and soaking up every piece of wisdom James offered. But he was still young enough to enjoy fishing with his siblings and reading by the fire at night. Rose had blossomed into a spirited 12-year-old who seemed equally comfortable in a dress at church and in trousers helping her father in the barn. She had a gift with horses that even James admitted surpassed his own, able to gentle the wildest Mustang with patience and intuition. Catherine watched her daughter with pride and a bit of bemused wonder. Rose was everything Catherine had not dared to be at that age. Daniel at 9 was the family peacemaker, sensitive and artistic in ways that sometimes puzzled James but delighted Catherine. He filled notebooks with drawings of the ranch, the animals, his family, capturing life around him with surprising skill. Ellen, now 6, was attached to her mother's side, learning to cook and sew and tend the house, already showing signs of the same quiet competence Catherine prided herself on. One warm June evening, the family gathered around the dinner table, the conversation flowing easily. It was in these moments that Catherine felt most blessed, surrounded by the people she loved most, sharing a meal in the home they had built together. "Pa, John Henderson says he saw wolf tracks up by the north pasture," Tommy reported, helping himself to another serving of roast chicken. "We should probably check on the cattle up there tomorrow." James nodded thoughtfully. "Good idea. We will ride out first thing in the morning." "Daniel, you want to come with us?" Daniel looked up from his plate, surprised and pleased. "Really? You are old enough to help with the herding now. It is time you learned." James smiled at his younger son. "Your mother might not appreciate me taking you away from your studies, though." "His studies will still be there when we return," Catherine interjected. "It is good for him to learn the ranch work, too." "Can I come?" Rose demanded. "You have to help Mrs. Foster with the chickens tomorrow," Catherine reminded her. "We agreed you would earn your own money to buy that new saddle you want." Rose groaned but did not argue. She understood the value of keeping her word, a lesson both parents had instilled in all their children. After dinner, while Catherine cleaned up with Ellen's help, James and the older children went outside to enjoy the long summer twilight. Catherine could hear their voices through the open window, Tommy and James discussing breeding strategies, Rose arguing some point with her characteristic passion. "Mama, are you happy?" Ellen asked suddenly, her small hands carefully drying a plate. Catherine looked down at her youngest daughter in surprise. "Of course I am, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" Sarah's mama at school was talking about how hard life is out here. How some women back east have big houses and servants and do not have to work so hard. Ellen's brow furrowed. "I thought maybe you missed that." Catherine knelt down so she was eye level with her daughter. "Ellen, I did come from back east, it is true, but I never had big houses or servants. And even if I had, I would not trade this life for anything in the world. I have your father who loves me with all his heart. I have you and your brothers and sister. I have a home that is truly mine. That is worth more than all the fancy houses in the world. So you do not wish things were different, not for a single moment." Catherine brushed a strand of hair from Ellen's face. "Every choice I have made has led me here, to this family, to this life. I would not change any of it." Ellen smiled, reassured. "Good, I do not want you to be sad." "I am not sad. I am the happiest woman in Montana." That night, after the children were all tucked into bed, Catherine and James sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The stars blazed overhead in the clear Montana sky, so bright and numerous they seemed close enough to touch. "Ellen asked me today if I was happy," Catherine said, leaning against James's shoulder. "What did you tell her, the truth, that I have never been happier in my life?" James pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Good, because it is the truth for me too. Sometimes I still cannot believe how lucky I was that day you stepped off the train. I had expected a business arrangement. I got a love story instead." Catherine laughed softly. "We both did. I was so terrified that day, I thought I was making a practical decision, nothing more. I never imagined I would fall so completely in love." "When did you know that you loved me?" Catherine considered. "I think there was not one single moment. It was 1,000 small moments. The way you picked wildflowers for the table before I arrived, how you gave me time and space to adjust. The respect you showed me from the very beginning. How you looked when you talked about the ranch with such passion and pride. And then that day with those men when you stepped between them and me without hesitation. I think I knew then that I was falling for you, even if I was not ready to admit it yet." "I knew the first time you laughed," James said quietly. "It was maybe 2 weeks after you arrived. Something one of the chickens did struck you as funny and you laughed out loud. It was such a joyful sound. I remember thinking that I wanted to hear that sound every day for the rest of my life. You never told me that. There are probably 1,000 things I have never told you, like how beautiful you look in the morning with your hair down. How proud I am when I see you with our children, the kind of mother you have become. How you make even the hardest days bearable just by being there." James tilted her face up to his. "How after 15 years of marriage my heart still beats faster when you walk into a room." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "Stop, or you will make me cry." "Why, I am just telling you the truth. Because I am so happy it overwhelms me sometimes. I think about that girl I used to be, alone and afraid in Boston, and I can hardly believe she became this." Catherine gestured around at the ranch, the home they had built, the life they shared. "I wish I could go back and tell her that everything would be all right, better than all right, that she would find a love deeper than she ever imagined possible." "She was brave," James said. "That girl who got on the train not knowing what she would find. She took a chance and look what came of it. We both took a chance. Best decision I ever made." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands, listening to the night sounds of the prairie. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. An owl hooted from the barn. The wind whispered through the grass with a sound like the ocean. "Do you ever think about the future?" Catherine asked. "What will happen as the children grow up and leave?" "Sometimes. It is hard to imagine this house without them all thundering through it." James squeezed her hand. "But I look forward to it too, in a way, just the two of us again, like those first months. We will have time to do things we have put off. Maybe travel a bit, see some of the country." "That sounds wonderful, though I admit I cannot imagine wanting to leave Montana for long. This has become my home in a way nowhere else ever was." "Mine too. I left Ohio looking for something I could not name. I found it here, found you here." James stood and pulled Catherine to her feet. "Come on, let's go to bed. It is still early, I know, but I want to hold my wife and tell her how much I love her, and I would rather do that in private than out here where anyone might ride up." Catherine laughed and let him lead her inside. Even after all these years, James could still make her feel like a young bride, desired and cherished. That was a gift she would never take for granted. The turn of the century arrived with a mixture of celebration and reflection. In Silver Creek, the whole town gathered for a New Year's Eve party at the church hall. Catherine and James attended with their children, now ranging from 17-year-old Tommy to 9-year-old Ellen. The Thornton family had become a cornerstone of the community, respected and well-liked. As midnight approached, Reverend Matthews led the assembled crowd in a prayer for the new century, asking for blessings and guidance in the years ahead. When the clock struck 12, cheers erupted and James pulled Catherine into his arms for a kiss that made her blush and the children groan in exaggerated embarrassment. "Happy New Century, Mrs. Thornton," James murmured against her lips. "Happy new century, Mr. Thornton." Catherine smiled up at him. "Here is to 100 more years together. At least 100. The first few years of the new century brought changes to the Thornton family. In 1902, Tommy announced his intention to attend the agricultural college in Bozeman to learn modern ranching techniques. Catherine's heart broke a little at the thought of her firstborn leaving home, but she was proud of his ambition. "You are sure about this?" James asked his son the night before he was to leave. "I am. I want to learn everything I can so I can help make this ranch even better." Tommy looked earnest and young despite his height and broad shoulders. "I will come back, Pa. This is my home. I just want to be the best rancher I can be." "You already are." James clapped his son on the shoulder. "But I understand. Learning is never wasted. Go and make us proud." Catherine hugged Tommy fiercely the next morning as he prepared to board the train. "Write to us, every week." "I will, Ma, I promise, and eat properly. Do not just live on coffee and beans." "I will not." Tommy grinned. "Stop worrying, I will be fine." But Catherine worried anyway, as mothers do. The house felt emptier without Tommy's steady presence. Rose stepped up to take on more of his responsibilities, working alongside her father from dawn to dusk. Daniel continued his studies, showing an interest in becoming a veterinarian. Ellen grew into a sweet-natured 11-year-old who loved helping her mother with everything. Letters from Tommy arrived regularly, full of enthusiasm for his studies and longing for home. He returned for Christmas and summer breaks, bringing with him new ideas and techniques that he and James would discuss for hours. Catherine loved watching her husband and son, their heads bent together over plans and diagrams, building the future of the ranch together. In 1904, Rose stunned them all by falling in love with William Foster, their ranch hand who had been working for them for 7 years. He was 10 years her senior, quiet and hardworking, and he treated Rose with a respect and devotion that won over both Catherine and James. "I know she is young," William said nervously when he came to ask for their blessing. "But I love her, sir. I will spend my life making her happy." James looked at the young man who had become like family over the years. "Rose is strong-willed and independent. She needs a partner who respects that." "I do respect it. It is one of the things I love most about her." "Then you have our blessing," Catherine said warmly. "Welcome to the family, William." The wedding took place in the spring of 1905 with the whole town in attendance. Catherine cried as she watched her daughter pledge her life to William, remembering her own wedding day 23 years earlier. James held her hand throughout the ceremony, and when she glanced at him, she saw tears in his eyes too. "Our little girl," he whispered. "She is happy." That is all that matters. Rose and William built a house on the far end of the ranch, staying close to family while establishing their own home. Within a year, Rose was pregnant with their first child, and Catherine found herself preparing to become a grandmother at the age of 46. Time continued its relentless march. Tommy graduated from college and returned home permanently, bringing with him a young woman named Margaret whom he had met at school. They married in 1906, and Margaret fit into the family seamlessly, charming everyone with her quick wit and genuine kindness. Daniel left for veterinary school in 1907, determined to return and provide care for the animals of the county. Ellen, at 16, showed no interest in leaving, content to help run the household, and learned everything she could from her mother about managing a home and family. Catherine and James watched their children build their own lives with pride and a touch of melancholy. The house that had once rung with young voices was quieter now, though never truly empty. Grandchildren began to arrive. Rose and William had 2 sons in quick succession, while Tommy and Margaret had a daughter who was the image of Catherine as a young woman. One evening in the fall of 1908, Catherine and James sat on their porch, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. They were both in their 50s now, their hair streaked with silver, their faces lined with years of sun and wind and laughter. 26 years, Catherine said softly. "We have been married for 26 years. Best 26 years of my life." James pulled her closer. Do you remember what you asked me about growing tired of you? How could I forget? You said not in 100 lifetimes. I was wrong. Catherine pulled back to look at him in surprise. What? I was wrong, because 100 lifetimes would not be enough. I would need 1,000 lifetimes, 1,000,000, and it still would not be enough time to love you as much as you deserve. James cupped her face tenderly. Every year, every day, every moment with you has been a gift. I am not tired of you. I am more in love with you than ever. Catherine felt tears slip down her cheeks. I love you too. So much it frightens me sometimes. I think about how different my life could have been if I had not answered your advertisement, if I had not gotten on that train, and it terrifies me. But you did. You were brave enough to take a chance on an unknown future. And look what we built. Catherine looked out at the ranch spreading before them, the house they had expanded over the years, the barn where Tommy was probably still working, the smaller house where Rose and William lived with their boys. The land they had nurtured and protected, the family they had created. We built something wonderful, she agreed. We built something that will last. Our children, our grandchildren, they will carry this forward. We will live on through them. That is a lovely thought. They sat in silence, watching the sun set over the mountains in a blaze of gold and pink. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, and Catherine felt a profound sense of peace. This was where she belonged. This was home. The following years brought both joy and sorrow, as life always does. James's partner retired, and Tommy took over his share of the ranch, becoming a full partner with his father. The operation continued to thrive under their joint management, with Rose and William contributing their expertise as well. Daniel returned from veterinary school in 1910 and set up a practice in Silver Creek, quickly becoming indispensable to the ranchers and farmers of the area. He married a teacher named Susan, and they built a house in town, though Daniel spent much of his time traveling to various ranches treating animals. Ellen surprised everyone by falling in love with the new schoolteacher, a gentle man named Robert who shared her love of books and music. They married in 1911, and Catherine watched her youngest daughter start her own family with bittersweet joy. In 1913, Catherine and James celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary. They had 8 grandchildren now, ranging from newborns to energetic 8-year-olds. The ranch house that had once seemed so spacious felt wonderfully crowded when the whole family gathered for Sunday dinners. But it was during these gatherings that Catherine noticed James moving more slowly, taking more breaks, his breathing slightly labored after physical exertion. When she expressed concern, he waved it off. I am just getting old, Catherine. It happens to all of us. But Catherine insisted he see Daniel, who examined his father with growing concern and then insisted they travel to Virginia City to see a proper doctor. The diagnosis was a weak heart, damaged by years of hard work and high altitude. The doctor prescribed rest and medication, warning James to take things easier. James hated being sidelined, but he grudgingly followed orders, turning over more of the physical ranch work to Tommy and William. He spent his days managing the business side of the operation, keeping the books, planning breeding strategies, offering advice based on decades of experience. Catherine found herself both relieved and worried. Relieved that James was resting more, but worried about the shadow she sometimes saw in his eyes. He had always been a man of action, and being forced to slow down chafed at him. I feel useless, he admitted one night as they prepared for bed. You are not useless. You are still running this ranch. Tommy and William may do the physical work, but you are the brains behind the operation. It is not the same. Catherine took his hands in hers. James, you have worked harder than any man I know for more than 30 years. You have built something incredible. Now let others carry some of the load. You have earned the right to rest. I just hate feeling weak. You are not weak. You are human. And I need you to take care of yourself because I am not ready to lose you, not now, not ever. Catherine's voice broke slightly. You promised me we would be together always. I'm holding you to that. James pulled her into his arms. I am not going anywhere, I have too much to live for. True to his word, James stabilized over the following months. He adjusted to his new role, finding satisfaction in mentoring his children and grandchildren. He taught his grandsons to rope and ride. He read to his granddaughters. He and Catherine traveled to visit Daniel and Ellen in town, enjoying overnight stays that broke up the routine. Life settled into a gentler rhythm. Catherine found herself grateful for every ordinary day, every quiet evening, every morning she woke up beside her husband. She had learned not to take anything for granted. One summer evening in 1915, the whole family gathered at the ranch for Tommy's birthday. The house and yard overflowed with children and grandchildren, laughter and conversation filling every corner. Catherine looked around at the faces she loved, at the family she and James had created, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. After the meal, as the sun began to set, James stood and clinked his glass for attention. The conversations gradually stilled as everyone turned to look at him. "I just wanted to say a few words," he began. 33 years ago, I sent an advertisement to a Boston newspaper looking for a wife. I expected a business arrangement, maybe a companion. Instead, I got Catherine." He looked at his wife, his eyes warm with love. "Catherine, you have made my life richer than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me a home, not just a house. You gave me a family. You gave me love beyond measure. Every day with you has been a blessing." Catherine felt tears streaming down her face as James continued. "And all of you, our children, our grandchildren, you are our legacy. You are the proof that love, hard work, and faith can build something that lasts. I look around this room and I see the future of this ranch, of this family, and I know it is in good hands." Tommy stood and raised his glass. "To Ma and Pa, the best parents anyone could ask for. To Ma and Pa." The room echoed. Catherine stood and went to James, wrapping her arms around him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for choosing me, for loving me, for building this life with me. Thank you for answering my advertisement, for taking a chance on a stranger, for making all my dreams come true." James held her close. "Not in 100 lifetimes would I grow tired of you. You remember that?" "I remember. And I feel the same way about you. 100 lifetimes would not be enough." They stood together, surrounded by their family. Two people who had started as strangers and built a love that would echo through generations. The ranch they had carved from the prairie would continue long after they were gone, tended by children and grandchildren who carried their blood and their values. As the evening wore on and the grandchildren were tucked into various beds around the house, Catherine and James finally found themselves alone on their porch. The stars blazed overhead, just as they had on countless nights before. "This is what I dreamed of," James said quietly. "When I first came out here and claimed this land, I used to sit and imagine what it would be like, filled with family, with love. But the reality is so much better than anything I imagined." "We were blessed," Catherine agreed, "more blessed than we deserved. No, we worked for this. We chose each other every day. We built this through love and sweat and determination. We earned this." Catherine leaned against his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, memorizing the feeling of his arm around her. "Promise me something, anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, you will remember how much I love you, that every day with you has been a gift, that I would not change a single moment of our life together." James turned her face up to his expression serious. "I promise, and you remember the same." "Catherine Thornton, you are the love of my life, the only woman I have ever loved, the only woman I will ever love. If I die tomorrow or 50 years from now, that will not change. Do not talk about dying. We all die someday, darling, but love, real love like ours, that never dies. It goes on through our children, our grandchildren, in the stories they will tell about us. We will live forever in the legacy we leave behind." Catherine knew he was right, but she still held him tighter. "I am not ready to let you go." "Then do not." "I am right here, and I am not going anywhere if I have any say in it." The years that followed proved James right. Though his health limited him physically, his spirit remained strong. He continued to be the heart of the family, the patriarch everyone turned to for advice and wisdom. Catherine remained by his side through everything, his partner in all things. More grandchildren arrived, and eventually even great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to prosper under Tommy's management, with Rose and William and their children contributing their skills and energy. Daniel's veterinary practice thrived. Ellen and Robert built a happy life in town, raising their children with love and care. Through it all, Catherine and James remained devoted to each other. They celebrated their 40th anniversary in 1922 with a party that brought together more than 50 family members. They renewed their vows in the same church where they had married, before many of the same people who had witnessed their original union. "You take this woman to be your wife." Reverend Matthews asked, though it was actually his son who had taken over the ministry. "I do, again and always." James slipped the ring back onto Catherine's finger. "And do you take this man to be your husband?" Catherine looked up at James, at the face she had loved for 40 years, at the man who had given her everything. "I do, in this lifetime and every lifetime to come." As the years advanced into the 1920s, Catherine and James settled into the peaceful rhythm of old age. They were in their 60s now, content to watch their family flourish, to enjoy their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, to sit together on their porch and count their blessings. One warm evening in the summer of 1925, Catherine and James sat on their porch as the sun set, just as they had done thousands of times before. James had been particularly quiet that day, more reflective than usual. "What are you thinking about?" Catherine asked softly. "About how lucky I am." "How lucky we are." James took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. 43 years, Catherine, 43 years of marriage, and I love you more now than I did on our wedding day. How many people can say that?" "Not many, I think," Catherine smiled. "We were blessed. We were." "And I want you to know something." James turned to face her fully. "If I could go back and live my life again, I would not change a single thing. Every choice, every moment, every day has led me here to you, to this life we built. It has been perfect. Perfect is a strong word. We have had our challenges, true, but we faced them together, and that made all the difference." James leaned over and kissed her gently. "Thank you, Catherine, for saying yes, for getting on that train, for building this life with me, for loving me. Thank you for finding me. For bringing me here, for showing me what love really means." Catherine rested her head on his shoulder. "Not in 100 lifetimes would I grow tired of you. Not in 1,000 lifetimes could I love you enough." They sat together as the stars emerged, holding hands, hearts beating in synchrony after more than 4 decades together. The ranch spread out before them, a testament to their love and labor. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren laughing, carrying on the legacy they had built. This was happiness, Catherine thought. This was what she had found when she took a chance on a stranger's advertisement all those years ago. Not just security or shelter, but love in its truest, deepest form, a partnership that had weathered every storm. A bond that would last not just through this lifetime, but echo through all the lifetimes to come. The years continued their gentle progression. Catherine and James celebrated their 45th anniversary in 1927, surrounded by a family that now spanned 4 generations. Their love remained the foundation upon which everything else was built, an example to their children and grandchildren of what marriage could be at its best. And when people asked Catherine about her life, about coming west as a mail-order bride all those years ago, she would smile and say, "I went looking for survival and found everything I never knew I needed. I found home. I found family. I found love, and that has made all the difference." James would squeeze her hand and add, "Best decision I ever made placing that advertisement. Best day of my life when Catherine stepped off that train, even after all these years." Someone might ask, "You never grew tired of each other." And James would look at Catherine with eyes still full of love and say what he had told her that day when she asked if he would grow tired of her, what he had proven true through decades of devotion. not in 100 lifetimes. And Catherine would lean against him, feeling safe and cherished and deeply loved, and know it was true. They had built something that would last forever, a love story that had begun with a simple advertisement and a young woman's desperate hope, and had blossomed into something rare and beautiful and eternal. Their story would be told and retold by their descendants, passed down through generations as a testament to the power of love, faith, and commitment. The ranch they built still stood, managed by their great-grandchildren, the land they had nurtured continuing to flourish. But more than the ranch, more than the land or the cattle or the buildings, their greatest legacy was the love they shared. A love that started with a stranger's kind eyes and a woman's brave heart. A love that grew through years of hard work, joy, sorrow, and triumph. A love that proved, beyond any doubt, that sometimes taking a chance on the unknown leads to the most beautiful destiny imaginable. And so they lived, Catherine and James Thornton, their days filled with the simple pleasures of a life well lived. Grandchildren climbing onto their laps for stories. Great-grandchildren taking their first steps across the porch where Catherine and James had sat for so many years. Sunsets painting the Montana sky in colors that still took their breath away. The endless prairie stretching to the mountains, wild and beautiful and home. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the material success or the prosperous ranch or even the large family, though all of those things brought joy. What mattered was that two people had found each other across the distance, had chosen each other every day for more than 4 decades, and had built a love that would never fade, not in 100 lifetimes, not in 1,000, never.